The vast expanse of the Bar M Ranch stretched as far as the eye could see, a tapestry of rolling grasslands and distant, hazy mesas under the relentless Arizona sun. For young Bo McCready, however, the beauty of his family's sprawling ranch was often overshadowed by the long shadow cast by his father, Jedediah "Iron Jaw" McCready. Jedediah was a legend in the territory, a cattleman whose grit and determination had carved the Bar M out of the unforgiving land. He was a man of few words and even fewer compliments, his approval as rare and precious as a desert bloom. Bo, his youngest son, often felt the brunt of his father's silent disapproval, a constant undercurrent of disappointment that seemed to permeate the very air around them. Bo was different from his older brothers, Wade and Clay. While they possessed Jedediah's stoic build and seemingly innate understanding of cattle, Bo was leaner, more bookish, and possessed a restless spirit that yearned for more than the predictable rhythm of ranch life. He loved the open range, the feel of a horse beneath him, but his mind often wandered to the stories he devoured in the few books he could get his hands on, tales of faraway lands and daring adventures. Jedediah saw this as a weakness. In his eyes, a true McCready was a man of action, not words, a man whose lifeblood was the land and the cattle that grazed upon it. Bo's quiet nature and his occasional missteps in ranch work, a missed gate latch, a clumsy roping attempt, were met with a curt shake of the head and a dismissive silence that stung more than any harsh words. "You've got the heart of a scholar, boy, not a cowman," Jedediah had once grunted, his gaze fixed on the horizon as Bo struggled to saddle a particularly skittish mare. The words, though few, had echoed in Bo's mind, solidifying his own insecurities. Bo tried. He truly did. He spent long hours in the saddle, pushing himself to keep pace with his older brothers, his hands growing calloused, his body aching. He learned to read the brands, to track stray cattle, to anticipate the unpredictable moods of the herd. But no matter how hard he tried, he always seemed to fall short of his father's unspoken expectations. Wade and Clay, though not unkind, often inadvertently reinforced Bo's feelings of inadequacy. They were naturally adept at the cowboy life, their movements fluid and confident where Bo's often felt awkward and hesitant. Their easy camaraderie with their father, the silent nods of approval they received for a job well done, were a constant reminder of Bo's own perceived shortcomings. The biggest event of the year for the Bar M, and indeed for much of the territory, was the annual cattle drive to the railhead in Dodge City. It was a grueling journey, hundreds of miles across open range, fraught with dangers, stampedes, river crossings, rustlers, and the sheer exhaustion of days and nights in the saddle. For a McCready man, participating in the drive was a rite of passage, a testament to their skill and endurance. This year, the Bar M was undertaking its largest drive ever, a massive herd of longhorns that represented a significant investment and a crucial step in expanding their operation. Jedediah was putting together his best crew, a mix of seasoned cowboys and trusted hands. Bo, despite his father's reservations, desperately hoped to be included. He approached Jedediah one evening as the ranch hands were gathered around the campfire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and brewing coffee. "Pa," Bo began, his voice hesitant, "I was wondering about the drive." Jedediah looked up from sharpening his knife, his gaze steady and unreadable. "What about it, Bo?" "I want to go," Bo said, his heart pounding in his chest. "I want to ride with you." A long silence followed, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant lowing of cattle. Jedediah finally spoke, his voice flat. "This ain't some Sunday picnic, Bo. It's hard work, dangerous work. Men's work." "I know that, Pa," Bo insisted, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. "I've been working hard. I can handle it." Jedediah's gaze remained fixed on his knife. "You're still green, son. You're not ready for a drive of this size." "But I want to prove myself," Bo pleaded. "I want to show you." Jedediah cut him off with a sharp gesture. "There's nothing to prove, Bo. You're my son. But this drive, it needs men who can pull their weight, men who won't be a liability." He looked at Bo, his expression firm. "You'll stay here, help with the ranch work. You'll be more useful here." The words hit Bo like a physical blow. The shame burned in his cheeks, the familiar sting of his father's disapproval washing over him. He swallowed his disappointment, his shoulders slumping slightly. Wade, sitting nearby, offered a sympathetic glance, but even his unspoken understanding felt like a confirmation of Bo's inadequacy. Clay simply nodded in agreement with their father, his loyalty unwavering. The next morning, Bo watched as the massive herd of longhorns was gathered, the air filled with the dust and the lowing of thousands of cattle. He saw his father, a commanding figure on horseback, barking orders with his usual gruff efficiency. He saw Wade and Clay, their movements confident and assured as they helped to organize the drive. And he felt a pang of longing, a deep ache of not being included. As the drive finally set off, a river of cattle flowing across the open range, Bo stood by the ranch fence, watching until the dust clouds swallowed them whole. The silence that followed felt heavy, amplifying his feelings of shame and disappointment. He was a McCready, born and raised on this land, yet he was deemed unfit for the most important task a cattleman could undertake. But amidst the disappointment, a flicker of determination ignited within Bo. He would prove his father wrong. He would find his own way to prove his worth, even if it wasn't on this cattle drive. He just didn't know how yet. The Bar M Ranch felt strangely empty in the wake of the massive cattle drive. Bo threw himself into his work, the familiar tasks now carrying a sharper edge of determination. He mended fences with a meticulousness he hadn't possessed before, his hammer blows echoing his resolve. He spent hours observing the remaining cattle, honing his understanding of their behavior, anticipating their needs. He even sought out the older ranch hands, men who had seen countless drives, and listened intently to their stories and advice, absorbing their wisdom like parched earth drinking rain. Days bled into weeks. Bo received occasional updates about the drive from riders who returned to the ranch for supplies. The news was mixed. The herd was massive and unwieldy, the terrain challenging, and the threat of rustlers ever-present. Jedediah's letters, brief and to the point, offered little insight into the difficulties they were facing. One sweltering afternoon, a lone, dust-covered rider galloped up to the ranch, his horse lathered and breathing hard. It was Jimmy, a young cowboy who had ridden with the Bar M for years. His face was etched with worry. "Bo!" Jimmy exclaimed, his voice urgent. "We need your help. The herd, it stampeded last night. A lightning storm scattered them for miles. The old man, he's hurt. Wade and Clay are trying to round them up, but they're spread thin. We need every hand we can get." Bo's heart leaped. This was it. His chance. He didn't hesitate. "Saddle my fastest horse, Jimmy. Tell me what you know." Within the hour, Bo was riding hard, following Jimmy's frantic directions. The landscape was scarred by the passage of thousands of hooves, the air still thick with the scent of dust and fear. As he rode, Bo's mind raced. He thought of his father, injured and relying on his sons. He thought of the scattered herd, a fortune lost if they couldn't be recovered. He found the main camp in disarray, cowboys exhausted and disheartened. Wade and Clay, their faces grim, were organizing small groups to search for the lost cattle. The sheer scale of the disaster was overwhelming. "Bo, what are you doing here?" Wade asked, his surprise evident. "Jimmy came for help," Bo replied, his voice firm. "Tell me what needs to be done." Jedediah lay in a makeshift tent, his leg bandaged and his face pale with pain. He looked up as Bo entered, his usual gruffness softened by exhaustion. "Bo, I told you to stay at the ranch." "Things have changed, Pa," Bo said, meeting his father's gaze. "You need every hand you can get. I'm here to help." Jedediah studied his youngest son, seeing a determination in his eyes he hadn't seen before. He nodded slowly. "All right, son. Listen to your brothers." But Bo had his own ideas. He had spent his time at the ranch studying maps of the territory, memorizing the landmarks, understanding the likely paths the scattered cattle would take. He had a plan. "Wade, Clay," Bo said, his voice confident, "the herd will be spooked. They'll likely head for the familiar grazing lands to the north, towards the broken creek. If we can cut them off there. His brothers exchanged skeptical glances. Bo, the bookish younger brother, telling them, seasoned cattlemen, how to round up a stampeded herd. But desperation lent weight to Bo's words. They were losing time, and their current efforts were yielding little success. Reluctantly, they agreed to let Bo lead a small group north. Bo rode with a focused intensity, his knowledge of the land proving invaluable. He anticipated the cattle's movements, using the terrain to his advantage. He found small pockets of the herd, calmed them with a quiet patience that surprised even himself, and slowly began to guide them towards Broken Creek. His understanding of cattle behavior, something he had diligently cultivated during his time on the ranch, proved to be his greatest asset. He knew how to read their fear, how to soothe their panic, how to anticipate their next move. Days turned into a grueling test of endurance. Bo rode tirelessly, often alone, tracking and herding the scattered cattle. He slept little, ate sparingly, driven by a fierce determination to prove himself and to help his family. Slowly but surely, he began to bring the scattered fragments of the herd back together. Small groups joined larger ones, guided by Bo's relentless efforts. The other cowboys, initially skeptical, watched in amazement as the young McCready seemed to possess an almost uncanny ability to locate and manage the lost cattle. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Bo arrived back at the main camp, driving a significant portion of the herd before him. Wade and Clay stared in disbelief. Even Jedediah, leaning heavily on a crutch, looked on with a mixture of astonishment and pride. "Bo, how did you?" Wade stammered. Bo simply shrugged, exhaustion etched on his face.